when you live in a flat place where you can't really get a lot of elevation training. Naturally, you can't get altitude training when you are at a low elevation place or low elevation place. It's hard to get altitude training, but what about elevation training when you live in a place that's really flat and you can't really get a ton of elevation? And this is something that several of you brought up when you clicked to join our Facebook group. And I asked like, what questions or how can I help with your training? I would say that half of the questions that I got were relating to elevation and altitude training. So I just wanted to talk about that briefly, a few things that I've noticed with women who climbed Kilimanjaro with us last year and a few things that I've noticed on other trips that I've led. I live at 7,000 feet and have pretty good access to hills for the most part when I go in the mountains. So I'm not very good at talking about living at a low altitude area, but I can talk a lot about elevation training, and altitude sickness prevention. So I came up with this acronym to help all of us get some more elevation training in. And the acronym that I came up with is RIDE. So RIDE. I like acronyms. I used to be in the Army. Everything in the Army is an acronym. So if you live in a pretty flat area and you're training for a big hike with lots of elevation gain, I would recommend maybe thinking about RIDE. So when you're just out doing your regular workouts, your runs, your walks, your hikes, your bike rides, whatever you're doing right now to just move your body. So the R is for resistance. And I think about what can you do to add some resistance to your walk. Let's just use walking as an example. So someone earlier this week mentioned that they were walking on the beach and the sand was causing some pretty good resistance. It's hard to walk through sand, dirt, anything that's not like a smooth gravel, smooth paved surface. So that surface can add some resistance. The I stands for incline. What can you do to get an incline? So can you find a hill and go up and down a hill in your neighborhood? Can you hop on a treadmill? What about stairs? I live in a really old house and we have 5 sets of stairs in my house. And I found that if I start in my basement and work my way to the top floor where I am right now and work my way back down, I can actually get a pretty significant amount of stair climbing just in my house. The D would stand for difficult. What can you do to make your exercise just a little bit more difficult? We talked about weight as it pertains to resistance. That also increases the difficulty. Walking on uneven terrain, uneven surfaces, rocks, sand, dirt, gravel, tree limbs. Are there a lot of tree limbs? We have a river in my town and there's a little section along the river that has a bunch of rocks. And I found that if I just put my backpack on and I go and I walk on these uneven rocks, that's actually a pretty good workout. And I can actually do some elevation training just on these little rocks on the side of the river. Anything with unpredictable footing is great, and it's going to increase the difficulty of your workout. And the E in RIDE, this acronym to help you get elevation training without elevation, stands for elevated surfaces. Can you go up and down steps like we talked about? Can you step up and down a box or a bench at the playground while your kids are playing? Elevated surfaces are really cool. We have a woman right now who is going to Kilimanjaro with us this summer in August in less than 4 months. And she lives on an island where it's like impossible to find any elevation or altitude training. And so she is like, every day I just go up and down this box all day, not all day, but she spends a lot of time just stepping up and down a box, which seems pretty monotonous. But really, what's the difference between finding a box to step up and down and hopping on a treadmill? You're still moving, but you're going up. So it's just a matter of finding what works for you and using those other things that you have available, and then thinking just what can I do to make the training that I'm doing today have a little more resistance, maybe a little more incline, maybe a little more difficult, or how can I get to those elevated surfaces? So those are my thoughts on if you live in a flat area and you need to train for some hills or some altitude. And there's other things you can do to train for altitude, but we'll talk about that later. If you have seen the news lately, there's been all of this talk about debunking the myth of like 10,000 steps a day. People are saying that 10,000 steps a day means nothing, that you can still get have a great level of fitness with 4,000 steps a day or 5,000 steps a day, which I don't disagree with the experts there, but I am quite obsessed with my step count. And I know that that's super controversial and maybe it's not like all sciencey and that's fine. But I just want to tell you why we have built our training programs off of step count. And this has been some work with me and Sam, who was one of my former employees, who's a personal trainer. He put together a training program for Kilimanjaro last year. And then I climbed Kilimanjaro. We came back and we made some modifications. So anyway, I just feel like he's a really smart guy. And I've been focused on step count with him because I really love step count, because when I track my steps every day, it gives me a measurement of how active I've been throughout the day. And my goal is to be active throughout the day, not just to have like one workout every morning and then just be like, okay, I'm done with that. I just did, 30 minutes at the gym, 45 minutes at the gym. Workout complete. I want to just keep my body moving throughout the day. So if I'm measuring my steps, it's a reminder to move throughout the day. So for example, on Wednesday, I woke up, I went on a run. I ran two really slow miles. And then I went and I took my puppy out on a 4-mile hike, and I had 15,000 steps before 10 o'clock in the morning. And then I went to the gym and I did some strength training. And then throughout the day, even though I had my 15,000 steps, it wasn't just a reason for me to just sit around and not do anything until later that evening. But it was like, okay, I still made my step goal, but I still need to stay active. Versus yesterday, my kid was at a track meet. So I had to travel to get to his track meet. I'm watching the track, him run, and it's super fun. And then I have to do some shopping because I'm in this bigger city where there's a lot more stores to shop at. And then I have to drive home. Then I got home and I'm rushing to cook dinner. And then last night my husband took me to the symphony because we're fancy like that. Not really fancy, but we like to go to the symphony. So my whole day was like super, super busy. So I knew that I had a busy day when I woke up on Thursday morning. So I tried to get a longer walk in. And then during my kid's track meet, when he had a break between events, I just walked around where I could, around the bleachers, around the track. There was like you could walk the entire way around the track without being on the track. There was like a nice little fence. So I walked laps at a break during my kids' track meet, and I was able to meet my step goal. I didn't meet my goal of doing 60 minutes of yoga, but it's just like if I'm tracking my steps, then it's that reminder just to move throughout the day. Because when it was noon yesterday and I'd only gotten 7,000 steps in, I was like, oh shoot, I need to I got to kick it up or I'm not going to meet my 15,000 step count goal. So that's why I like a step count. And also when we're hiking, it's walking. I think people in the outdoor industry really tend to make hiking out to be like this big thing. And it can be, right? And lots of us here have done those big hikes, like those big adventure hikes. But really, if we just break it down to what hiking actually is, hiking is walking. And so just being able to walk throughout the day, I think is important. And when we're thinking about those big expeditions, those big trips, it's really a series of walking and then little breaks and walking some more and little breaks and walking some more. So if we can kind of structure our work day as if it's a day on the trails and we're thinking, okay, I'm gonna walk a little bit and then I'm gonna do, half an hour work, an hour of work, 2 hours of work, but then I'm gonna make sure that I get up and go for a walk after lunch. and then I'm going to try to move my body throughout the day. I just think that's really healthy. And really that's what it comes down to, right? It's just being healthy and strong so that when we go on any hike, regardless of what it is and where we're doing, if we are not trained to walk, we're just going to not have fun. That hike is going to be so much more difficult because we haven't conditioned our bodies. And I don't want to suffer too much when I'm on these big trips. I don't want to suffer too much when I'm on these little trips, which is why I just like step count as a reminder to move my body throughout the day. So that is my rant. That is why I like step count. That's why step count's important to me. It's not about losing weight. It's not about even like training. It's just about moving and moving my body. Okay. I'll get off my soapbox there. If you disagree with me, let me know. Or if you agree with me, let me know. Maybe there's other ways that you think about moving your body throughout the day that don't involve stepping. Maybe you set a timer on your watch and every hour, and I think that's powerful. Or maybe you do a couple stretches or a little bit of yoga throughout the day. And that's cool. And I just love to know your thoughts on step count as it relates to hiking and hiking preparation. And then also maybe if there's ways to move your body throughout the day that I haven't thought about. Totally, I'm all ears. The next thing is, maybe we'll do like a whole class on altitude sickness or a whole discussion on altitude sickness at some point, as I'm getting ready to go to Kilimanjaro again. And I know that there's a few people mentioned that they were going to Peru or they'd been to this really high elevation area. I came across some interesting research about red blood cell count as it relates to altitude illness prevention. There was an Instagram post, I think like mountaineering coach Kate or something like that. She posted this thing about getting your red blood cell count before you go on a big climb and altitude illness. And I was like, oh, this is fascinating. I need to dive into this and why this is important. And I do have a degree in exercise science, but I have not been an exercise scientist ever in my entire life. But anyway, I found some interesting research about your iron count, iron deficiency, and altitude sickness. And just to kind of break it down to make it really simple is low levels of iron can potentially increase altitude sickness. And that's because iron produces hemoglobin, which is the protein in red blood cells that carries oxygen from the lungs to the rest of the body. So that's really important because if you don't have sufficient iron, then your body can't produce enough hemoglobin, and then that reduces your body's ability to transport oxygen. And when we increase in elevation, the air pressure is lower, which means that there's less oxygen available, and that decreases blood oxygen saturation. That is why when we're on Kilimanjaro, the guides check our oxygen saturation levels every night. In Peru, we did it every morning and every night, because that's just like telling the guides a lot of information about how our body is adapting and adjusting to the altitude. So when there's lower oxygen, our bodies then produce more red blood cells to increase the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood. And that is why when we go to Kilimanjaro, and like lots of mountaineers use this climb high, sleep low philosophy, and that all has to do with how our body is producing red blood cells. So the idea is that when you're high and you come back down to sleep, then your body gets better rest, and your body does a better job of building those red blood cells. And then the next day you climb high again and you kind of stress your body out, tax your body a little bit, and then you come back down and you sleep better. And our body can't work to produce those red blood cells. Then it has a much more difficult time doing so. And if you're a doctor out there, if you're an exercise scientist out there, and I just butchered that, let me know and we can fix it. But what I was able to garner off of, where did I get this? The Mayo Clinic's website, that's what happens. So it's important to make sure we're getting those iron rich foods, meat, spinach, dark chocolate. Pumpkin seeds have a lot of iron in them. And then combining those iron-rich foods with some vitamin C can actually help our bodies absorb that iron a little bit easier. So like I like to think about like a spinach salad with some oranges on top is delicious. Stir fry. You could get the vitamin C from those peppers and add that with a little bit of like lean beef or chicken, chocolate and oranges. Like dark chocolate and oranges are delicious to eat together. So what I'm trying to say is if you're scheduled for a really big adventure and a high altitude area, head to the doctor, 8 to 12 weeks before your climb and get some blood tests done. I don't know about you guys, but I am all about trying to figure out anything that I can do before a big trip that's going to make my life easier at altitude. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts. I'm answering your questions. So if there's a question you have, drop a comment below. Let me know. Get out there and move your body and hopefully enjoy some sunshine. See ya.